Saxon Algebra Lesson 60, Finding Special Products of Binomials. In these equations, we will have a binomial that's squared. That means that there are two binomials multiplied together. So it's example 1a, x plus 2 squared, means it is x plus 2 times x plus 2. We learned in the past that we use the FOIL method to solve this equation. What FOIL is the first, the outer, the inner, and the last. But one thing cool about having this squared is there is a special step we can do without having to do the steps of the FOIL method. The first step is, because that squared goes with the x, so it'd be x squared, and that squared goes with the 2, which makes it a positive 2 squared. And in the FOIL method, that comes into play here, x times x, and 2 times 2. Now the middle number is this step, the x times 2, and this 2 times x. What's so cool about this special step is both parentheses have x plus 2. So in this middle step, that's what we'll have, x times 2. There are 2 parentheses. That's why the squared's there. Creates those 2 parentheses, which makes us multiply this times 2. The squared is a big deal when it comes to this special step, because it tells us that the x is squared, the 2 is squared, and we have to multiply the middle number times 2 because of those 2 parentheses. To get our final answer, we just multiply. The x squared stays as x squared, and we multiply x times 2 is 2x, times 2 is 4x. And then 2 times 2 is 4. So, the special step states that when we have a binomial that's squared, we take the 2 numbers inside the parentheses, which is x and 2, and multiply that by 2 to get the middle number. Then we take both numbers inside the parentheses and square each, the x squared and the 2 squared, to get our final answer. The same special step applies in this example 1b, 2x plus 4 squared. In this example, there is a 2 touching the variable. That does not change anything. Like I said, the same rule applies. Remember, this 2 makes the 2x squared. That 2 makes the 4 squared. Now the middle number, remember, we multiply the 2 terms in the parentheses, which is 2x and 4. And because it's squared, we multiply that by 2. And to get our final answer, we solve it. 2x squared is 4x squared. 2x times 4 is 8x. 8x times 2 is 16x. Now 4 squared is 16, and that is our final answer. Remember, I did the squared with the 2x, the squared with the 4 to get my outside numbers. My inside number, I did 2x times 4, which are the two terms multiplied by each other, and I multiplied that by 2 because of the squared. Creates two parentheses, which makes me multiply the middle number by 2. Let's move to a negative. Example 2, 2x minus 7 squared. Same rules apply. The 2x is squared. The negative 7 is squared. Then we multiply the two terms together, which is 2x times 7. And remember, because it's a negative 7, make sure you put negative. Times 2. Because that squared makes two parentheses, so we always have to multiply the middle number by 2. Now, multiply to solve to get our answer. 2x squared will be 4x squared. 2x times a negative 7 will be a negative 14. Negative 14 times 2 is a negative 28. X. And then negative 7 squared. Negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49. In this next example, we're going to change it just a little bit. Example 3a. X plus 3, x minus 3. Before we get started on this example, let me show you something that's going to help you further along in this example. What is positive 3 minus 3 equal? 0. Great. That's going to help us in a few minutes when solving this equation. Example 3a, x plus 3, x minus 3. Let's go ahead and circle the plus and minus. In a minute, I'll tell you why we actually circle this equation. Same rules apply as before. We have two parentheses, same equations, only thing that's different is the plus and minus. So, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take our x's, we're going to multiply them. That will give me x squared. Take our 3's, and we're going to multiply them. Positive 3 times a negative 3, which will equal a negative 9. Because this is where that rule applies, the reason why we circled the plus and minus sign, because we have the same exact equation with a plus and minus sign, there is no middle number. If you remember that rule, this equation is easy to solve. The answer is x squared minus 9. We noticed it has a plus and minus sign, so all we did was multiply our x's, makes it x squared, and multiplied our positive 3 times our negative 3 to get our negative 9. And remember that rule, because we have the plus and minus sign, there is no middle number. Example 3b, 5x plus 4, 5x minus 4. Hopefully at this point you notice that these two equations match. The only difference is the plus and minus signs. So go ahead and circle that. Because if you remember, that means something special. Do you remember what it means? No middle number. So all we do is multiply our 5x's, 5x times 5x, which is 25x squared, and multiply our positive 4 and our negative 4, which will, if you remember, always look for that positive and negative sign. If you guys ever have questions, come find me.